Are you a technician who wants to set yourself apart? Then the Trusted Technician podcast is for you. I'm Derek Hoferter, coach and trainer at SBE, and on this podcast, we will have experienced HVAC coaches and trainers, as well as top-performing technicians, all sharing their tips and strategies to help you be more successful. Welcome to another episode of the Trusted Technician podcast. I'm Coach Derek, and today's episode, we have Bryan. Bryan is in Phoenix, Arizona with George Brazil. Bryan, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Derek. Thank you for having me. How are you today?
I'm doing well. And Bryan, thanks so much for taking time. I know we're technically in the fall, but it's still like in the hundreds there in Phoenix.
Yeah, I was
right?
like in 10 yesterday.
Yeah, it's still pretty busy. So I appreciate you taking some time out. But just to get started, Bryan, how did you get into being an HVAC technician?
Well, almost 15 years ago now, I was trying to figure out what I was doing in life, and I was actually a painter. So I was painting houses and stuff like that, and I painted just about everything. And I was painting for a friend on a rehab he was doing, and there was a guy there installing some HVAC equipment, and we were just talking, and he was like, this is a good thing. I know painting's good too, but this is a real good thing. And I was interested. So I asked him, and he said, look into going to school, go get certified and all that at school, and then just go get a job and just go for it, and I did. Completely,
Yeah. Okay. So a big shift.
Yeah.
And you said that was like 15 years ago?
Yeah, just about now. Yep.
Okay. So you've got a lot of good experience. What has been your favorite thing about it? Like, what keeps you doing it?
My beautiful wife and children, that's my why. My why is so strong that I can't fail, so having to take care of the household and the bills and all that. So a lot of responsibility, and we go through ups and downs in our seasons, and boy, you just really gotta be on it and be mature and be responsible to be a productive adult in society, really.
For sure. And yeah, it's like you said, something with seasons. At some point, like we said, it's still in the hundreds there in Phoenix. At some point it'll calm down,
Yeah.
a little bit and switch to kind of like the off season. So
Right.
what are some of those challenges of maybe like the off season that you're kind of talking about, of the swings and seasons?
Well, there's obviously like no demand calls. So if you're a demand driven technician that is, only able to sell because you don't have a process, because it's 100 degrees in someone's house, you're going to find out real quick how much you're skipping over as far as the process goes.
Let's dive into that a little bit more, because I love that too. And just the idea that when it's 100 in someone's house, you don't really need a process to,
Right.
to sell them something, right?
Right.
But when it's nice outside in Phoenix, when people just start opening their windows and not running their system, it's a whole different ballgame. So talk to me a little bit about what that means to have a process for that.
Well, I've always been a thorough technician. And once I really came to George Brazil and figured out that, there is something to call it a process, right? I was doing things that I didn't know I was doing that now we have words and terms to put to. And luckily for me, my first job back home in Chicago, when I started this, he was a really good guy, threw me my keys to the first van, and he really taught me to just always take care of the customer, always. And I kind of didn't understand what that meant until I really ended up here at George Brazil years later, when, like I said, they put the words to it, right? And the process that we stick with is the trusted advisor process, right? And getting to know the customers and spending the time with the people. The air conditioner and the heater, I always tell them, I was like, oh, I'm here to spend my time with you. The work is the easy stuff. Your air conditioner, I'll get to that. And they always laugh and they appreciate that I'm there with them. I'm not just they're against them like a lot of them think. We're all on the same team, and that's what's really changed. So over the years now, I enjoy being with the people.
Mm.
I've done low temp and commercial stuff where you don't talk to people, and that's good for some, but I really enjoy being with the people at this point, doing residential work.
So it's not knock at the door. Hey, where's the problem? I'll
Right.
see you later.
Yeah. Right. And when you really have a process that you add to a demand call, wow, that's a game changer.
What do you mean?
Well, like the guys that come in and they're just, boom, let's change your capacitor because that was the problem. After hours fee, capacitor, see you later. Right. What I really do is still spend the time, right? Because how long does that call take? 15 minutes. You
Mm.
know, I still spend an hour, right, at midnight going through the system and really pointing out some things, but then getting into saying, hey, when was the last time this was actually maintenance? What other breakdowns have you had? Have you had any issues? And what we'll do is we'll set up a follow up for me to go back maybe in a couple of days or the following week, depending on what time I was there at night. And I go do a full maintenance. I just had two yesterday that I booked last Thursday when I was on call that I went back and did the maintenances for them yesterday.
Mm.
So you go there, take care of the issues, maybe at the time because it's late, and then come back and give them a full service like they deserve.
Wow. There's, especially like the demand call, right? When it's really hot, they're probably not the only system that broke that day. So
Yeah.
how do you balance though volume versus quality, right? Because I think like for a lot of technicians, for a lot of HVAC companies, they fall into the idea of it's volume, right? It's how many houses can we get into
Right.
today versus if you have a process that's going to restrict the number of places you could go to. So how do you balance that out?
I run every call for what it is. I don't worry about the workload. You have to worry about it in such a way if you want to be useful to the company, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you have to be there for the customer at every call, right? So, to be honest with you, starting the process and really learning the process and going through with it wholeheartedly, I've ran less calls this year than I did last year because we track all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
My numbers are actually significantly higher. I'm on track to hopefully hit 1 million this year. And I will say, if you just look at how many calls I ran this year versus last year, it's like half the amount.
Yeah, approximately how many calls have you ran this year?
This year,
Yeah,
only like 250, to be honest with you.
250.
Yeah,
Wow.
I'm at almost 800,000 in revenue for those calls.
From 250 calls. And we're here in October, which is the 10th month
Right.
of the year, right?
Yeah.
So you might end up with what, 300?
Yeah. Yeah. The goal is, yeah. Yeah. So I'd like to hit 1 million at least.
1 million in revenue on 300 calls.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's definitely a different equation than most techs are trying to do. So you said the process. You worked other places, you've been a tech for a while, and you were saying, you kind of had to learn fully what it meant to take care
Right.
of the customer. What were the hardest things for you to change, maybe as like habits or things that you were doing that are inside the process? Like what didn't come maybe as naturally?
What do you like? What was easy to make the change to implement the process? You mean?
Yeah, or something, were there things that you just like, I don't know about that, or like you struggled with,
Uh,
or it was hard to change your way of doing things with?
so so I'm all about learning and classes, and I listen to sales stuff, sales podcasts, and
Hmm.
personality podcasts, and like personal growth, like all that stuff, right? So I already had the mindset of
Okay.
to be like that, right? I went for all my master heat pump certifications, so I took every one of those classes. I'm the guy that sits in the front and I get one wrong on my test and I'm like, darn it, I knew that was the answer, and I switched
Yeah.
the right one, that's always me.
Mm-hmm.
So when they were teaching this process,
And you were learning it for the
I
first time. Yeah.
was learning it for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
I actually just let it totally take me over.
Oh, wow.
I didn't fight it one bit, and I just dove all the way into it. And
Wow.
to be honest with you, it completely changed my whole life. It didn't just change my work life, right? Once I really understood why there's a process. Why do we have the process? Because yes, obviously it helps us in business, right? But the process is actually what people prefer we act like,
Mm,
right? Now that we
mm.
have a process, right? People complain about the 15-minute guy,
Yeah.
like a lot. They're like,
Yeah.
oh, you guys have changed a lot. The other company that I used to use, they just would come for 15 minutes. They've never flushed my drain line. They've never
Mm-hmm.
cleaned my coil, you know? I mean, that's mind boggling to me.
Yeah. That is actually the number one complaint that HVAC companies get about technicians is hey, this guy was here for 10 or 15 minutes. I don't even know what he did. And he's telling me that I need to do all this work. And they can't understand time compared to dollars, and it doesn't make any sense to them,
Right,
right?
right, right. That's the demand technician.
Yeah. And then, which is fine when it's demand work. Well, not fine, but you can get through it. But once it switches to maintenance,
Right.
you're going to be in trouble if that's
Here-
your 15-minute mindset, right?
Here's the thing with the demand technician, right? Send me to the demand call at midnight, right? I clean up, and there could have been, multiple people there that were from the old process and this and that, or maybe they don't even work here anymore, right? But I go in and show them the new process and they just can't believe it. The red carpet at the door, the shoe covers, the getting to know the customer part and the being with the customer part is a huge part of that because you have to understand what matters to them, right? I can show them this big list of stuff, but if that stuff doesn't matter to them, then you just look like a jerk,
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, yeah, that is true. So you were saying that when you learned the process, you went all in, right? You just accepted it. And I think it does speak to your mindset that you had. Because I feel like a lot of technicians, and maybe a lot of technicians who are listening to this, have an issue with limiting beliefs, right?
Right,
Of, oh, that'll never work, or that's not going to work where I live. That might work where Bryan lives in Phoenix,
right,
but that's not going to work where I live out
right.
here. These, as a trainer who teaches the trust advisor process, these are the things that I often hear from techs. That kind of been your experience too with
It
some
is.
other techs?
It is. And I'm actually one of the field trainers here.
Okay.
So I'm also teaching this process and I get that. I get that exact thing, right? Because I'm teaching the process. So some people are like, well, this is fake. I'm like, well, don't be fake, be real. That's what they want is you to be real. You just have to learn that they really enjoy this, right? Like the time that I've spent with people on those calls this year versus years in the past, you know, they truly appreciate it. Like they thank me wholeheartedly for addressing what they want addressed, what they thought was a good idea. I'm not pushing my agenda. I'll take something that doesn't make sense to them and put a big old X over it on that recommendation sheet, right? We've talked about it. Now the seed is planted, right? But it didn't matter to them at that moment. So I need to take that away, right? Because it doesn't matter what I think, it matters what
Mm,
you think, you know?
yeah. Yeah, that's tough to overcome those limiting beliefs, right?
You have to have faith in things you cannot see.
Yes, and you have to trust, right?
Yep.
It's kind of funny that it's the trusted advisor process, but there's a lot of trust that the technician needs in the process too, right?
Well, you have to believe in what you're doing. If you don't believe in the work you're doing, you're not going to believe that they need a duct cleaning and the guys that are going to go there are going to do a good job, right? Yeah, you have to believe in it all, and you have to have faith in the company that you work at. And I'm very blessed to be at George Brazil, surrounded by a solid team of people.
Yes.
I mean, it's. I've never worked for a company like this that has every resource available. I mean, the helplines that we have, and then the attitude here, the work morale, the company morale. Everybody's so kind and polite here. I mean, I've definitely found my home for sure. I'm never going anywhere else.
Yeah. Bryan, we got to wrap up on this episode. I've really enjoyed everything that you're saying. That's such a good insight. If there's someone listening to this, you said you're a field trainer, so you interact with technicians. If there's a tech listening to this who's like, I struggle with the people side of it, the machine I've got,
Right.
and I hear what you're saying, it's about the people, it's not about the machine. Where should they start with trying to get better at relating to their customers?
Get comfortable in the uncomfortable. Get comfortable in the silence, the awkwardness, right? Talk less, right? We tend to over talk, over, give too many examples, and then the customer's lost in that. And be genuine, be genuine, get comfortable in the uncomfortable, talk less and listen more.
That's great. That's great advice. And so hard to do, even though it requires doing less. It's so hard to just be quiet and be comfortable with some silence. But that's great advice. Bryan, thanks so much for joining the podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Trusted Technician Podcast. If you would like to learn more about SBE, you can find us online at sbeodyssey.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, we would appreciate it if you would leave us a review. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.